Well, I'm Larry Scogan. It's my good fortune to be the president of Bismarck State College, and I want to welcome all of you to our campus. I see we've got a number of new faces here, and I suspect that's because who our guest speaker is today. And we do this, we've been doing this now for 4 years, having these conversations at Bismarck State College, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but first some administrative kind of notes to talk about. I do want to point out to everybody that we are in the throes of Arts Quest here at our campus, which I consider the best celebration of arts I've ever seen at an institution of higher learning. And there is a folder, looks like this, when you came in on the table, so please grab one on your way out if you didn't take one. We're about halfway through Arts Quest, but that means we got another half to go. And so there's a lot of events going on, and I encourage everybody to participate in these. I do want to also say that there's a couple of catalogs that you've probably gotten in the mail lately, and some were in the paper, Sunday paper today. The OLLI that we do in collaboration with University of North Dakota has wonderful, wonderful classes that folks can take. Some of them are one-day classes, some of them are field trips, some of them are 4 or 5 day classes that you can take. It's really lifelong learning, that's what it's all about, and so I encourage folks to take a look at that and to sign up for some of those classes. And then Bismarck State College does enrichment, and you probably got something like that in your mailbox. If you didn't, I'm sure Robin can get you a copy. And it has all sorts of enrichment classes that we have here on campus, because our idea is that we are your community college, and we want to bring people up here to the college, and that lifelong learning is as much a part of our mission as anything else that we do here. So I encourage all of you to take a look at the enrichment classes as well. A couple other things that as you came in, if you didn't pick up, Conversations at BSC 2012-2013. And we've got an excellent list of conversations that we will be starting this coming October. I'm very excited about our first one. As you know, many of you know, Clay Jenkinson just published what I consider the best essays ever on Meriwether Lewis. And one of my mentors in my study of history is Dr. William Foley, and he is the premier biographer on William Clark. So this is going to be really our very first one in October. Is going to be a very exciting conversation with Dr. Foley and Clay Jenkinson talking about the relationship between Clark and Lewis, and I think that's just going to be a fascinating conversation, so I encourage you all. And then we've got a whole list of about 5 or 6 others that we will be doing as well. Also, as you came in, you saw this little critique, a little white piece of paper, and it says, how did you hear about this? Because it's important how we target our advertising, and also if you've got any suggestions for improvement. And you can put all kinds of comments down there, you know, when you can put down comments like Scogan's always better dressed than Jenkinson, or that Shyla liked that one, right? Or when you put down comments like, you know, the Clay's presentations are outstanding, which is always true. But we also want to hear if there's topics that we're not talking about that you'd like us to talk about. Go ahead and put those down. So we like the compliments, but we also like to hear if there's things you'd like us to do differently in these conversations, so you can fill that out as well. There's a couple of other handouts today from ITEMP, that Patrick Atkinson's organization that we'll be talking more about. So I encourage you, there's a bookmarker from the God's Child Project, and we're all well aware of that, in a folder on ITEMP. So if you didn't pick that up on your way in, please pick them up on your way out. The last thing I want to talk about is that this is our last presentation for this season. And it is amazing to me that we have done this for 4 years. So we're concluding our 4th series in the Conversations at Bismarck State College. And my hat's off and my deepest appreciation to my good friend and colleague on this, Clay Jenkinson. Clay is the one that came up with this idea. I had asked Clay if he would come do a series of lecture on the campus, and he said, no, but I'll do a series of conversations if you'll participate. And so forced me into it, and I've never been more delighted in my life in being able to do that. The intellectual structure of what we do, the topics that we cover, the presentations that are given when we start off our conversations and all that. Clay Jenkinson does about 99.9% of that work, and that other 0.1 is when I show up and get to introduce the topic. So I am just delighted that we've had 4 years of these successfully, and so Clay, if you'd please stand up and get the acknowledgement. So I'm excited that we're going to be doing the 5th year of this coming up here starting this next October. Okay, enough for that. Now today's topic, and I'm going to be introducing our good friend Patrick here in just a minute, I think is going to really dig into our own consciousness here. Being in North Dakota, and we wonder, well, what's human trafficking got to do with us? And I think that Patrick is really going to awaken us to the realities. And as I was thinking about this topic, I took in my PhD program, I actually took a course on slavery. And everything I learned about slavery really resonated with me as I was thinking about Patrick coming and talking about human trafficking. And so I dug out Orlando Patterson's book, Slavery and Social Death. If you just want to read one book that really tries to help you understand slavery, this is the book I recommend. And I just want to read one sentence out of this book in the opening pages of this book. And he sets it off by saying that everybody had slavery. All cultures have had slavery. Then he says, slavery was not only ubiquitous, but turns out to have thrived, most in precisely those areas and periods of the world where our conventional wisdom would lead us to expect it least. What a profound statement, that not only has slavery been everywhere, but where you expect it least is where it turns up. And so on that note, I want to introduce our guest for today. Patrick Atkinson was raised in Bismarck, North Dakota, and attended Minnesota State University, Moorhead. After graduation in 1981, Patrick turned down lucrative corporate job offers to work with runways, prostitutes, and gang members in New York City's Hell's Kitchen. 2 years later, Patrick moved to Central America, where he began a 25-year international career in war zone reconciliation and post-war reconstruction. From these experiences, today Patrick is the founder and president of the Institute for Trafficked, Exploited, and Missing Persons, is also the founder and international executive director of the God's Child Project, which most of us from Bismarck are most aware of, and several other associated charities in the United States, Central America, and Africa. He is the recipient of numerous awards. He has been named the benefactor of the city of Antigua, an international recognition last awarded 400 years ago, knighted by the Spanish Order of St. James, and recently received the Guatemalan National Congressional Medal of Honor in recognition of the risks he took and the thousands of Mayan Indian lives he helped to save during the bloodshed of Guatemala's 36-year civil war. In 2007, Patrick was named Goodwill Ambassador for Peace by the government of Guatemala. He is also the subject of the biography, The Dream Maker, by Monica Hannon. In 2000 and 2001, Patrick was invited by the United Nations to develop child development and educational programs for street children left orphaned by the rampaging AIDS crisis in East and South Africa. Today, Patrick resides in Central America and at Hippo Wallow Pond, his family home outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Please welcome to Bismarck State College, Patrick Atkinson.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Patrick.
Thanks. How's the mic? Is it good? How's my computer? Okay, we're going to have to check and just kind of cross our fingers and hope that for the 4.5 hours that this presentation takes, the computer hangs in there and works fine. You know, we've got 30 minutes today, and it's a topic that once we get going, it's going to be going very quick. I'm looking around the room and I'm saying, okay, who have I talked to before? And I just see one or two faces that I recognize from other presentations. We're talking about some of the ugliest presentations that could possibly exist, and this is the presentation of human beings, of children, of our children, from boys and girls from Bismarck, Dickinson, Willen, the Heartland, being sold as prostitutes. I always look around and I see if there are children present so that I know if I need to curtail my language, because we are going to talk about topics that are very hard-hitting: prostitution, gay rape, pornography, child pornography. Some topics that go kind of quick. But once we start going, which is in about 30 seconds here, we're going to go, and we're going to go quick. It's going to take about 30 minutes, and when you leave this room, you're going to leave knowing more than 99% of everybody in your world. Unless you happen to work in law enforcement, you're going to walk out of here with a special knowledge, but also a special responsibility, because this is happening right here in North Dakota, right here in the heartland of the USA. As Dr. Scogan mentioned, I'm from Bismarck, North Dakota. Right here, went to St. Mary's High School. We're still trying to figure out if I'm a BSc alum or not. I thought I took classes there, but we're talking a lot of years ago, 30-some years ago. And I said yes. Dr. Scogan's staff said no. There's not an inconsistency there. But I went to Moorhead State University, and Moorhead State University, I was 19 years old, and the truth is I got into this field that I've been in for my entire life because when I was 19, I wanted to meet girls. True story. I was walking down the hall in Moorhead State University, and there was a poster up there that said they were looking for volunteers to work at a crisis line. And I thought, what would be a cooler way to meet girls than to be 19 years old and have a pager on? And you go to parties and they say, what's that about? And you say, oh, I'm a crisis line counselor. So I signed up for it with a bunch of my friends, and we all went in, and I was the only one who actually went to the orientation program, which had 3 parts, which was don't give out your name, don't tell them where you are, and don't ever go where the problem is. And my other friends just didn't go back after that. When that was finished, I went out and I took my first assignment, and it was Friday night. And this was pre-cell phone, pre-email, pre-Facebook and all that. So we had a beeper. If the beeper went off and vibrated, you'd go to a phone, you'd dial it in, or you'd go down the street and use it, put in the coins, and use a payphone. And then they would patch it through to you. And the first call, here I am, 19 years old, 3 days out of this 45-second orientation. And the call comes through, and it was a 29-year-old mother who had been gang raped in Fargo in front of her 12-year-old son. And I'm on this phone, and it's me, and she's crying, and she said her son is unconscious. And I do, now what? And I write a note to my friend real fast, and he goes down to another phone and calls my supervisor, and he comes back, and I'm just kind of making talk for about 5 minutes or so until I get this answer of what we do then, because I wasn't ready for this. And the message that came back was, do the best you can. That's all it was, and I still have that note, and listen, for everybody here, that is one of the main themes. Do the best you can. You will never be prepared for what life throws at you, so what do? Do the best you can. We got her help, we got her out. The program I was volunteering with asked me to start going around to schools. I'd go out to schools and from Williston and Bismarck and Fargo and Crookston and Detroit Lakes, and I'd talk to the kids, and my one theme that I kept coming across again and again and again was this. I'd throw myself down on my knee like this, and I'd say, listen, don't run away. Statistically, and that's true for this group here, statistically, some of you boys and girls are victims of sexual abuse, are victims of physical abuse, of alcoholic families. And that's true with this group here today, April 22nd, 2012. If that is your case, and I would plead with the kids, don't run away. Because if you run away, the streets will kill you. Afterwards, parents would come up to me, and they would say, can you talk to us in private? And I'd say yes, and then we'd talk, and it was usually about a child of theirs who had run away, who had disappeared, who had gone off to school and never come back. down in Bowman, North Dakota. I did a presentation down there at Bowman High School, and this big rancher, we're talking big rancher, he must have been 6'6", 300 pounds. After my presentation, he comes up to me, and he says, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Yes." Actually, I didn't. I went like this, "Yes." And then he said, "Can I take you to my house and talk to you in private there?" And I'm thinking, I'm either going to die or something really bad happened. So we went out to his house, we go in, he pours me a cup of coffee, we sit down at the table, and he starts to sob like a baby. Seriously, this man must have been 6'6", 300 pounds, and he was sobbing like a baby. And what had happened 6 months earlier is he had been in a fight with his son. His 15-year-old son had come home at 10:15. And son had walked in late and put the keys on the desk, on the table, and the father was sitting at the table like this, 15 minutes late. And the son said goodnight, and the father kept sitting there. And the son kept walking, and the father said, "Get back here. You're late." And then the son said, 15 minutes. They got into a fight. The man stood up. He said, "Listen, it's my house, it's my castle, it's my way or the highway." And the son said, "You know what? Screw you. I'm out of here." And started to turn and walk. And the father said, "Go ahead. You know where the door is. Just don't let it slam you in the backside." And the boy said, "Okay," and kept walking. Now, stop, break, turn back the clock. You know what the father is thinking. The father is thinking, "Don't do this." You know what the son is thinking? The son is thinking, "Don't do this, Dad. It's 15 minutes. But what happens? Pride got in the way. They stopped talking. Egos, macho, insecurities got in the way. The son walked out the door. The father walked over the door and closed it. The son kept walking. The father turned off the lights and went back. The son kept walking down the driveway. The father went around the corner and looked back, expecting that at any minute the son was going to come up and knock on the door and say, "Dad, let me in." And the son kept walking. Now again, stop, freeze frame, turn it back. What are they thinking? The son is saying, "Don't do this." And the father is saying, "How do I get out of this without losing my sense of authority?" This dynamic happens again and again and again. And now parents and grandparents in front of you, I'm listening, I'm begging you to please, if you see this dynamic happening in your family, and I'm saying this from the most profound part of my heart, stop it. If it's with children, grandchildren, nephews, friends. The son kept walking. The father was now sitting in front of me at this table as I tried to figure out how to drink my coffee. And he said, "I've never seen my son since." And he never did. The boy never came back. Was he killed a mile down? Did he make it to Los Angeles? Did he die of an accident? Was he picked up as a hitchhiker and killed and put in a tree row? Nobody knows. But the father said, not an hour goes by that I don't think about my son and wonder where he is. And if I could just turn back the clock, using that awareness now, do the best you can. I graduated from college. During the course of college, 6 families hired me to go into the streets to track down their kids. Again, pre-Facebook, pre-internet, to track down the kids. And that was really my first experience with being streetwise. Okay? I'd read the diaries and talk to the teachers and talk to the friends and make phone calls and then sit on the bed in the child's bedroom and say, if I was her or if I was him, where would I go to? Where would I go to? Work out a certain expense budget with the family and then disappear. And I went from here to Denver, from here to Los Angeles, from here to New York. And that's where I first became, as now a 20 and 21-year-old student down at Moorhead State University in Moorhead, now Minnesota State University, aware of child prostitution and of this undercurrent that sucks the children off the farms and out of the small towns in North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota, Montana, and into the underbelly of our American fabric, the world of prostitution, pornography, and runaways. When I graduated, I went to New York City. That's my high tech. Did you guys catch that? Ready? There we go. Moorhead, New York City. You see, we're pretty classy. Went to New York City where I worked with runaways, street gangs, and all that. I went out to look for runaways from the upper Midwest, and in going up to the upper Midwest, I thought I'd find a bunch of kids washing dishes, struggling, begging for food. I thought I'd find kids that when I'd say, guess what, I'm here, I can get you home, they would say, let's go. And I would call the parents, and I would say, Mr. Whoever, I found your son. And he would say, bring him home. Instead, what I more often found are people that were just trying to survive on the streets.
I don't know how you guys do it. Just have to get. See you again next week.
You will.
Что бы я убил твою сестру? Нет. Иди.
Я сделаю все, что ты хочешь.
Вон он. Иди.
This is what I went from when my friends were back here in Bismarck and I was coming home on break. This is what I was kind of learning when going through the college, after college and graduation. Went down to Central America after doing the street gang work for 3 years in New York City. 1983, I started to work with war zone reconciliation. That means we try and get people to stop shooting with each other. It was in El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Colombia, a few other places that I worked in at the time. One thing I did in this particular picture I took of these kids, if you look at them, they're boy prostitutes. Well packed out, for sale. How much do you have to offer them? $5, $10, $20? They're yours. It's like an eBay. They'll go to the highest bidder. In fact, they'll go to any bidder at any given time. So I got into a conversation with them because I like to get to know people, especially before I take their picture. And I asked them, if you could have anything in the world, what would you have? And I was thinking, riches, chicas, nice house. You know what they said? A mother. That was their answer, a mother. Somebody who would take them, who would hold them, who would make sure they went to school, who was strict when it was time to be strict. But that's a universal fact that I have found across the board. Did that work for 7.5 years, went to Southeast Asia to work with the United Nations, setting up and developing, documenting the flow of children from the villages, small towns into bigger towns, Bangkok, Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia. That brought us up to where I've really got involved professionally in human trafficking. Also in war zone reconciliation, post-war zone reconstruction, but human trafficking. We're going to really start to fly now in this presentation, and we're just kind of warming up. We're going to talk about 3 parts. History of human trafficking in the world, particularly here in the Heartland. What it is today, and what we can do about it. As Dr. Scogan mentioned when we began, human trafficking has been with us forever. If you think about the Old Testament and the tribes and the conquering and the slaves that fled into the desert and let my people free. If you've seen the movie Apocalypto, Mel Gibson's flick, about the Mayan Indians, one tribe would conquer another. They would take the women back either as sexual servitude or to work as domestics. The children, they would put to work on the ships, in the fields, in the mines. The men, if they were a high risk, they killed them. It was a liability. If they weren't high risk, if they could control them, they'd put them to work in the fields. I mean, history has been like that since the earliest of times in Greece, in Rome, in all across the world. In fact, large parts of Africa, through DNA testing, they have determined, were largely populated by slaves that were conquered, and as tribes moved from one part to another along slave trails as a way of repopulating areas that had been decimated by war, by disease, by famine. 1442 is when the Europeans first started to go down to this continent, this big dark Africa continent, and to bring up slaves. 1442, 50 years before Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and started to take them up. When they'd bring up the Americans, the Africans, they would not bring them up as labor. They brought them up as circus animals. It'd be like us going out and hunting down llamas or elephants or camels and bringing them back and taking them from circus to circus and fair to fair. It became such a profitable industry that this is one of the original blueprints that I have in a collection of original slave manuscripts that I own. This is a slave moving ship. Look how incredibly efficient this Dutch builder was in terms of being able to bring over the largest amount of the harvest. And they would bring them over, they'd take them across first to Europe and then over to Cuba. From Cuba they were distributed into South America, Central America, North America. They estimated that when they went over and went hunting, that they lost about a third of their harvest. So if the harvest got destroyed or mushy or soft or sick, what would they do with it? They would throw it overboard. It'd be very much like if we went down to Papa's Pumpkin Patch and we load up a pickup truck full of pumpkins. And we took them from here to Fargo, and when you got to Fargo, a third of the pumpkins were mushed or were squeezed in or bruised. And you just throw them to the side. It was no different. It was no different at all. This is a really core concept so we can understand the dynamics of slavery then as well as now in 2012. Steven Spielberg put a fascinating and beautiful face on this in his movie Amistad. He's very kind to let us use this clip from that movie as well.
I need you to tell me how you got here.
Nyalungo bi hunge angesia ufoni bi.
Oh, Babanja, people look at the pet. Can you bad me? Ow! Sembe. Apa we lo?
Now you notice the harvest that they did there. Imagine we go out and we round up cattle, horses. We go to Medora and we round up some Mustangs and wild horses there, and we corral them and we brand them. That's what they did as they rounded them up. They would brand them. They would then bring them over. If you'd like to take a look at them afterwards, these are some original 450-year-old slave chains. This would have hooked one man with another man as they carried them across in a shipping like this. These are not fakes, these are not counterfeits, these are the original thing. They're worth actually quite a bit of money. And when you hold them, if you can close your eyes and just imagine the passion of the man separated from his family, of the child torn out of his mother's arms as their children. This is for an adult. This one, as I continue, is for a child. This child torn out of the mother's arm, pushed away or going down to the creek to bring up water, hit over the head, caught with a net, and brought in. I couldn't even fit my wrist in that right now. So this was used to haul, God alone knows how many human beings, children, as they were brought in to either Cuba, South America, or Central America. They were brought across the ocean, just like you saw on the slave ship there. They were then put up for auction. They were sold. It was so much a part of this livestock auction. I've, as I mentioned, a very large collection of original slave documents, and this is one of the receipts from back then. It was having to do with the sale of slaves to this individual, George Washington, the founder of our country, the first president of the United States. George Washington and his wife Martha Washington owned 446 slaves at the time of when George Washington was president. At that time, the value of a slave in today's money was $40,000. So if you do the math, 40,000 times 446 slaves, they were very wealthy just based on the value of their inventory. George Washington's slaves, if you've been to Washington State, if you've been to Washington, D.C., George Washington's slaves were contracted by the federal government to take this swamp called the Potomac, which was basically a settling pool, a swamp, and to dig it into the river, which is today the Potomac River. That man work, that hard bucket by bucket work was done primarily by George Washington's slaves under contract to the U.S. federal government. It was no big deal. It was no big deal. They are machinery. This is another document I have in my collection. Slave life insurance, in which a man named Brutus is insured for $400 during the Civil War. He is insured by $400 just like you would insure a horse, a cow, a tractor, a combine, because that's what they were seen as. If you could imagine it right now, if you go down to a pet store and you go in and you say, I want to buy that dog. I want to buy that puppy. There's the dog, there's 6 puppies, and you say, I want this one. That was the same mentality. It's important we understand the mentality so that we can do something about it in today's world. This is the United Nations definition on human trafficking, on modern-day slavery. It's a very long definition. It gets a little complicated. The recruitment, transportation, harboring, receipt, the threat or use of forms to move people. Fraud, deception, and look at this particularly, position of vulnerability. The reason I focus on this particularly right now, this last clause, this last stanza, position of vulnerability, is because there is a shockingly high rate of date rape drugs right here in Bismarck, in Mandan, in North Dakota. Shockingly high rate. I did a presentation down at Cretin-Durham High School in Minneapolis and St. Paul actually, and I passed out a questionnaire. 85% of the junior high school kids personally knew somebody who had been date raped. We're not talking frat parties. We're not talking about the rare instance. We're talking about somebody who can go down to a discount store, pay $100, buy and get a $100 cash card, go online, Google it, pull it up, order it, have it sent to a P.O. box, a friend's address, or an address that's in a house that's not in use for the winter, buy it and resell it. And this is happening at the junior high school, college level, right here. I know it doesn't seem passable. If you're an emergency room doctor, if you're a social worker, if you're a school counselor, you know it is. This is happening right here, right now. So I focus on position of vulnerability. I'm basically a lazy person. I have too much to do. So I take all of that definition and I bubble it down into 2 words: force or fraud. In other words, is somebody being made to do something they don't want to do, or are they being tricked into it? Every now and then we'll read about stories where they do a raid. And they'll say, okay, they picked up 100 illegal immigrants. They picked up 100 undocumented workers. There were people hitchhiking through, and I don't think they're legal. That has nothing to do with human trafficking, because human smuggling is a contract for service. I'm in Central America. I will pay somebody $1,000 to get me to Houston or Chicago or Minneapolis. That's a contract. Human trafficking, slavery, on the other hand, happens when force or fraud. We all read this story recently here in Bismarck about child prostitution, child abuse ring that occurred out here in western North Dakota, right? Big headlines, big story. KFYR News did a story on which they interviewed me on. What happened there that made it force or fraud? The age. And if you read this story, and I read the entire case history, people were being tricked into it. They were being forced into it. They were being raped. They were underage. Most of the victims were between the ages of 12 and 16. Not only by legal definition, they cannot give consent, but by maturity, by force, by physical intimidation, by coercion, they cannot give consent. Prostitution is coming here, and it's already here. Boy prostitution, girl prostitution. I've been working with Minneapolis St. Paul Vice Squad on the movement of children and women from the Chicago area into the Twin Cities into the western oil fields. For what? For the men. For all these thousands and thousands and thousands of men who are being brought in, who are coming in from out of state, unattached, usually, sometimes with families, but unattached to get the salary, to get the job. Sometimes they have contracts, and oftentimes they don't. They're put up in these man camps. What do we think is going to happen? What we have to do is we have to be aware so that we can protect our children. Human trafficking, human smuggling, modern day slavery, illegal documentation, undocumented workers, two totally different things. We're focusing on the child prostitution, the pornography, and the human trafficking cases. There's three different categories. Sometimes people say, well, what is it? It's this, it's sex, it's labor, it's selling of the body. Illegal adoptions. A mother is standing there with her baby in her arms down in Mexico, over in Eastern Europe, in China. Somebody comes up, pushes a hand on the face, pushes them over, grabs the baby, picks them up, and runs away. They falsify the DNA testing. They take them to the U.S. Embassy. They get the papers, and they sell them in. We were involved a couple of years ago on a case in Minnesota where the birth mother pursued and tracked down who had literally pushed her down in the market, grabbed the baby, and taken the baby into illegal adoption. The baby had been adopted into a family in Minnesota that had hired a service and had taken this boy and was raising him as their own son. Now what do? Oh, does anybody win in that situation? Nobody does. Organ harvesting, I used to think that was urban mythology, but it is not. Where somebody is taken, they are drugged, and body organs are harvested. That does exist. We've worked cases with that with Homeland Security and Immigration Custom Authority. Labor, United Nations estimates that there's 25 million people today worldwide. Labor, human trafficking, slavery is the largest form of modern day slavery. 25 million people worldwide that are forced into labor, child soldiers. Does that happen here in the United States? Yes. The largest human trafficking ring in the history of the United States was based out of Hope, North Dakota, and was busted just a couple of years ago, where people were being brought over from primarily Southeast Asia, being told that they're given work visas and allowed to have jobs here. And what happened is their passports were taken away, the women were being sexually violated, the men were being beaten up, and they're being split apart and sold to farms around the United States, told if you leave, we will kill you. It's the largest human trafficking network in the history of the United States. But here in the United States, we have the sex industry. Estimated 21,000 people are brought into the United States each year to feed the sex industry from around the world, 21,000. An estimated 16,000 Americans, primarily children and women, disappear each year into the international sex industry. This is what we saw recently happen in western North Dakota, where on the Native American Indian reservation, the children, the 12 to 16-year-olds, were being abused, they were being raped, they were being forced to do horrendous things, and then they were being sold out to others. 21,000 brought in, and the startling fact that scares most people, 16,000 people disappear into it. The flow is almost always from the poorest areas into the richest areas, and as I mentioned, it doesn't just happen to them. It also happens right here at home and to our own children.
The mall's never gonna be the same after this.
No. Ooh. Hi.
Hi.
Oh yeah, these are great.
Right.
Yeah, I want to try this one on.
Maybe red. Try it. You'll never find a dress like this at home.
Okay. Okay, but I want to try on this one first, and then I'm gonna try on the other one. It is so beautiful. How did you do that though? I wasn't watching when you were doing that.
Like this.
I did see how you
Turn, and then wrap it like that.
it'll stay.
Slide it there. Yeah.
We're doing what we can. I'm following some leads to the car, but we don't have the license plate number.
How do you expect me to remember a license plate number when my daughter's being abducted?
Okay, Sam, it's probably fake anyway.
Mrs. Gray? Mr. Gray? Tom Halloran. I'm with the Department of Homeland Security, Office of International Affairs. Maybe we should speak in private. Please.
Oh my God. We've been feeling so lost here.
I know this is difficult for you.
It's terrorists, isn't it? I mean, they're targeting us at random just because we're from
No,
the
this isn't random. We believe Annie was abducted by sex traffickers.
No. That's a mistake. Well, why would they want an American girl?
Most of the people over here are gracious, honest, and decent. But where there's economic hardship and poverty, there are some who take advantage. They become predators. They look for easy targets, and I'm afraid young women like your daughter.
We got the picture.
No, Jack, it's better this way. He just wants us to know so that we can help.
I'm truly sorry.
In the next 7 minutes before I wrap up here and we begin the conversation, where there is fear, ignorance, lack of education, lack of preparation, lack of communication, turn back my presentation, where there is the pride that separates the two. All of these dynamics can go in to create extremely vulnerable boys and girls. This map here has prepared by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and it shows the blue states are by percentage where the greatest number of child prostitutes working in the United States that have run away from home are from. By percentage. You know, I'm seeing our own very own home state. This state here where I grew up and which I love so much. By percentage, the largest number of runaways that have been tracked down and recorded in as child prostitutes by the FBI as they do their studies. The red states is where they're going to, the destination states. Again, what we're looking at is we're looking at kids that are on the streets because in their hometowns, either the communications have broken down with their families, or they don't have a teacher they can talk to, or they simply think it's going to be better out there. And that's why I'll travel very far and wide to give the message to the kids and drop on my knees again and again and again and say, don't run away. Don't run away, because they're going to get tricked.
Igor, Sam is
The situation's really very simple. You wanted to come to America, and we got you here. But it all costs money. Your passports, visas, tickets, boarding, it all adds up. By now, each of you has accumulated a debt worth tens of thousands of dollars. Plus, interest and other expenses. Means, until you finish paying that money back to us, usually in a few years or so, we own you. Please understand, it is not my intention to cause you misery. We are in this together. But be very certain that if you try to run away, someone will pay the price. I have all your information. Where you live, how many brothers and sisters you have back home, everything. So if you get the urge to try to do something that might threaten our arrangement, you will get that urge and control it, or inevitably, someone close to you will be hurt. I want these two in Washington. Keep them clean. These guys complain about bruises and cuts. This one's been already housebroken, so take it easy on the face. She stays here. Boston, Queens, in that order. That's it. Get them acquainted and hit the road.
Dress up.
We have all your information. Don't do anything that's going to try and risk our arrangement. I own you. Now this is Eastern Europe. This is Eastern European women that have been brought over. They're being put out to sail in the Bronx. And they're going out to work the eastern coastline. But what does that mean? We have all of your information. Let's bring that right here to North Dakota. Let's bring that right here to the Heartland. We have all your information. The Institute for Trafficked, Exploited, and Missing Persons, which is a sub-program of the God's Child Project. God's Child Project has been around 21 years now. ITEMP has been around 10 years. We recently worked on a case down in Eagan, Minnesota, where upper middle-class kids, very nice, very well-educated kids, were told by somebody, come on, you're beautiful. I'm from a very internationally known clothing store based out of the Twin Cities. We're looking for youth models. Can I have you on the playground, which is where he found them? And yes, and all they did were they were playing. Throw a ball, catch a ball, kick a ball, climb a jungle gym. That's beautiful. Would you mind if we, I don't know, did a sweatsuit shot? And he had them go behind a car and change into a sweatsuit, and they did the same thing. That's fantastic. Can we get you in gym trunks and a t-shirt? And they took some more pictures. That's brilliant. Geez, you're a strong kid. Do you mind if I take off your shirt and we'll just kind of take a picture like this? That's great. Yes, here's my card. Can I meet you here tomorrow? Here's $50 for your time. You guys know where this story's going, don't you? Kids came back. They didn't tell anyone because their parents, of course, are going to yell at them for why were you taking off your clothes and putting on sweatsuits and gym trunks for a guy you didn't even know? But they thought they were going to make it big, and after all, they had $50 in their pocket. And this didn't happen, this again was a couple of years ago. Guy came back, he said, we're going down to the studio. They got him in the car, they got him out. They took him to a studio, and they did some more posing like that, and they went from the sweatsuit to the gym trunks and the gym trunks into the underwear. And all of a sudden, this kid is standing there in his underwear and probably starting to feel a little embarrassed, like this isn't going right, but it's going as it's going, and I'm in this deep, wrap it up. And before the day was over, they were doing child pornography, and once they were there, just like the man said, I have all your information. Do you really want your friends to see this picture? I can put it on Facebook tomorrow. And that's all they're going to talk about for the rest of the year. Do you really want that to happen? If the answer is no, I own you for the next 3 or 4 or 6 sessions. Okay, I'll do it. Just don't tell anybody, please. This happened to well-educated, upper middle-class kids. You see how vulnerable they are? When something like that occurs, whether it's rape of a child, the prostitution of a child, the buying, the selling of a child, it hits them on all levels, the physical, the psychological, the social, the emotional, the spiritual. It bores into the core of who they are. You saw those girls that were there who were brought over. They were brought over thinking they were going to be magazine stars and waitresses and hostesses. Instead, they're being taken into a basement and turned into prostitution. The FBI estimates that in the United States right now, there are 100,000 child prostitutes working the streets of the United States. We're not talking Amsterdam or Nairobi or Thailand. We're talking the streets of the United States, 100,000 child prostitutes working off Craigslist, working out of hotels or call services. Unfortunately, a number of them being prostituted out by their parents for drug money, for alcohol money, or simply for money. That's one of the biggest things to remember about human trafficking, and that's the point I've been trying to drive through all of this, is that when we're talking about human trafficking, modern-day slavery, we're talking about the buying and selling of human flesh, whether it be a child prostitute out in the oil fields or a kid that's been a runaway from here in the upper Midwest and has gone out to a bigger city. We're talking about internationally, kids that are put to work because their hands are small and they don't complain much. Very much like it was in the United States back in the 1910s, back in the 1920s. The kids can go into the smaller mines. They're turned into child soldiers. A number of us probably saw the video clip on Konya, and the enslaving of children in Africa. Prostitution and pornography industry is huge. 1 out of 6 websites on the internet is related to pornography. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's the fastest growing internet site genre, is online pornography. But the FBI and the US State Department also estimate that 90 to 95% of the girls and the women there don't want to be there. They're either there by force or by fraud. They were drugged. There they are. And you think, how could that happen? But then these pictures here, I went onto a New York City website and I downloaded these off their website of a modeling agency. And I'm asking myself, where are the parents? Where is the right that we have to become indignant and angry when somebody's taking pictures like this of our kids and putting them out there? It comes first and all to how we solve with this problem, and that starts with us. It starts with us. It starts with you being here on this beautiful Sunday afternoon to become aware of the problem. It starts with Bismarck State College and Dr. Larry Scogan, inviting me to come in and talk to you today about the dynamics of human trafficking and how it's sex-related labor industry and related to buying and selling of the body. The numbers that it affects. 21,000 people being brought in. The women we saw in the basement who came over thinking they were going to be waitresses and hostesses and put on the streets. This one, with the big black blue mark on the side of the face, has already been housebroken. And then we think again of the FBI statistic that the average age of a prostitute working the streets of the United States is 13, is when they started. So if you're talking about a girl who's out in the oil fields, a girl here, a woman out in the Twin Cities who is now 30 years old, statistically she's been on the streets working as a child since she was 13 years old. She didn't want to be there. It's about talking to your friends and your families. Talk to the God's Child Project. Mr. Murray Sagsfien is the Chief Operating Officer for the God's Child Project. I think a lot of you know him because as he had the disaster relief efforts last year, he's going to be running the machine of the God's Child Project and the Institute for Trafficked, Exploited, Missing Persons out of our Bismarck office. Have someone come out and talk to your school, to your church, to your youth group, to your community group. Because if people don't know, they're going to be just vulnerable. Somebody will come in and say, you know what, you are such a good-looking kid. This is a beautiful town of Dickinson where we grow up surrounded by Norman Rockwell. Can I bite you? Can I buy you a Coke? Can you take me to the zoo? I'm bored this afternoon. Can you show me a park? They buy a Coke, as we talked about the date rape drugs, the positional vulnerability, something gets put in it, something goes out, children are being horribly victimized. I talked to somebody from Minot Thursday, and they're telling me about their numbers of friends who have been raped and date raped up in Minot. It's about our friends and family. This girl here, Amy Bradley, she was on a cruise ship, high school graduate. They stopped in an island of Aruba, went up. She went to her parents and said, guess what, we're at port. 2 of the cruise line members have asked me to go dancing with them. Is that okay, Mom? And her mom and her dad said, yes, go. She went off the boat. She never came back. 6 months later, this officer goes in, military officer, U.S. military, goes in, sits down at a bar, orders a drink. Waitress comes over, leans into him and says, my name is Amy Bradley. They're making me work as a prostitute. I don't want to be here. Help me escape. He did this. Pulled out a $20 bill. He put it under his glass. He stood up and he walked out. He didn't want to get involved. He was not supposed to be there. It was off limits. 6 months later, he felt so bad, he told his commanding officer. The commanding officer told the FBI. The FBI went in. They couldn't find her anymore. But you can find Amy Bradley right now. If you Google her, she looks like this. That's Amy Bradley today, online. This is the girl who leaned in and said, help me escape, I've been kidnapped. All it takes, and this is how I started my talk, and this is how I'm going to end it, is we're never going to be ready. We're never going to have the position, the time, the ability that is perfect lineup. So we simply do the best that we can. Because when it's all done, We're going to help our communities, and I love North Dakota more than you could possibly imagine. We're going to help our children if we ourselves are aware, and if we say at that time, I can do something. I can do something, because when everything is said and done, it really is all about you. Being aware, having some basic understandings of the force and fraud dynamics of human trafficking, realizing that the prostitutes that we're talking about are not trash. They're girls, possibly boys, usually being brought in against their will. Somebody's mother, somebody's father, somebody's sister, somebody's son. These are the two groups that I'm associated with today: Institute for Trafficked, Exploited, Missing Persons, the God's Child Project. We've taken 40 minutes in this talk. You know more than 99% of the people who are in your friends. Share the message. Thank you. Your Excellence.
Thank you.
Hey, Clay.
Here's the water. You've been
thank you.
talking quite a bit. My goodness, I'll have to admit it here, Patrick. This is the most uncomfortable that I've, 4 years we've been doing this. This is a very uncomfortable topic. So thanks for making me so uncomfortable. So I want you to know that.
We deal with this dynamic all the time, that we're sometimes, true story, on planes with associates or people that we're working with, and we'll be talking very openly about child prostitution. And we'll stand up to grab our carry-on luggage, and we'll turn around, and everybody within 5 rows will be looking at us like this. And we think, oops, we should have kept our voice down a little bit. Yeah. It's a part of life. It's a reality. We work with it. You're making it possible by having us here today.
Well, I'm going to open up with one question, and then I'll turn to my good friend Clay here. He's a master at
what's your
defining. Okay, I will. How is it? I mean, you've thrown out figures: 100,000, 25 million. I mean, big figures. How is it that something like this can fly so low below the radar that, as you've said, for most folks in here, I'm sure this is the first time most of us have had a 40-minute presentation on this. How can millions of people be in human trafficking today, and hundreds of thousands of people being exploited, whether it's as boy soldiers or whatever the case might be, and we don't hear more about it? We don't feel directly affected by it. How can it be so low below the radar?
You know, it affects us, and we do hear about it. The Old Testament, for example, which a number of us probably saw this morning in our individual church services, or that we are raised up with, is filled with stories about slavery. The movie Amistad, the movie Taken, a very action-packed Liam Neeson film that was very popular about 2 years ago. We see it, it hits us, but it's one of those topics that is so jarring, and it hits the core of who we are, both as people and individuals, as people with a sexual identity, and as family members, that we see it and we build up a buffer around it. I've raised children, my own children, and the most terrifying scene of this entire presentation is when the girl is pulled into the back of the 3-wheel motorcycle and taken away. Because as a parent, and even right now I see that, and my heart just drops to my stomach, and I think, oh my gosh. And a number of you know some of my kids, Neto, for example, who comes to Bismarck quite often. And you just think, if that would have happened to him. But then we build this buffer, which is why I hammer at it again and again and again, every opportunity I can, because I want us to keep our kids safe. I don't want our children to have something horrible happen to them and then feel, this is a secret. It only happened to me. It's not. It's part of the community fabric of what the nation is, and unfortunately, with all of this development, who we are now as North Dakotans.
Well, I want to talk a little bit later about North Dakota, but maybe first, more generally. But first let me say I was sitting there and I had to actually get up and leave the room because I have a daughter who's 17 and is just going off to college in the fall, and I took her to New York City the other day, and she looked like the most innocent person in New York City. And then to see how easily this can happen. Normally when you think about this phenomenon, you think of people from broken lives, and of course that's probably the main pipe. But it's not just broken lives, is it?
No, it's not. Okay, now this is, I haven't quite worked out the vernacular on how to say this. I'm just saying it as it is. A lot of us are businessmen and women, and this is completely unscripted. So if I say anything wrong, interrupt me. Okay, when we're dealing with human slavery, human trafficking, we're dealing with the buying and selling of flesh as if it is nothing more than pork bellies or bushels of wheat or a used car. So if you have a car, a 2012 Lexus, very beautiful, shiny, sterling, it has a lot of value. And if you have a car like my car, 2004 cheap Cherokee with 200,000 miles on it, dented and rusting, not so much so. When you're looking at boys and girls and women, the more beautiful, the higher the price, period. If there is a desire, and a sexual desire is very strong, if there is a desire, there is a demand for a product, because that product will meet the desire. And if there is a demand for the product, somebody will step forward and provide that product and to make money on it. Regardless if we're talking about bread, silver, oil, demand, a desire creates a demand creates a market for a product. Somebody will step forward to create that product or find that product. What is your desire? Is it a 13-year-old girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, slender, from the beautiful, innocent Norman Rockwellian North Dakota, upper Midwest? If so, and there is that desire, that's such a specific desire and such a high demand desire that the price will be very high. Are you talking inner city, Philadelphia, little heavyweight, overweight, not very educated? No. The price for that product is going to be lower. Commodity, market, purchase, buy, sell, period. That's the best way to understand human trafficking. I have never seen your daughter, but looking at how incredibly good looking you are, Clay, I imagine she's very good looking. And if she is, and you're right as a father to see that and understand it, she has a much higher risk value because her price as a commodity in the marketplace is higher, so somebody is going to get a higher profit.
Yeah, but you're talking, you use this metaphor, and it was on the slide too, and you sort of pre-apologized for it, that human beings or human bodies thought about in the same terms as wheat or oats or gold or silver. And it's troubling, and I think everyone gets a little edgy about hearing it that way because we are talking about human beings. But if that's true, if I have a lawnmower that I don't need, I can put an ad in the paper and someone will buy it. And so you're giving kind of an Adam Smith conversation about desire and a provider. But providing a lawnmower to a guy in Mandan is different from taking a girl and providing him to somebody in Memphis. So what's the profile of the person who allows himself or herself to be drawn into this dark, dark, dark commodity?
But that's where I disagree. There is no difference between someone taking a lawnmower and buying the lawnmower and putting it on Craigslist and selling it out, and there it is. And it goes to the highest bidder. Or somebody taking a girl and putting her out and selling it for whoever it is. Two quick stories. When I was 22 years old and went from Bismarck to when I was working in New York City, I was directly involved with the FBI on a case of a boy that had been kidnapped off the streets in Michigan. And as we were able to track it down, because there's a lot of interest put into this kid, this child was kidnapped off the streets of Michigan, was taken to Long Island, which is a part of New York City, Long Island, New York, and sold in pure condition to a very, very wealthy individual on an estate, where he was kept on the estate as a 13-year-old boy as that man's sex toy. And when the boy started to object and got old and got used and got worn, the man then downsold this boy to a farmer outside of Denver, who had him on the ranch out there and who used him as a ranch hand and also for sexual purposes. The boy ran away once. The rancher called the sheriff, said, "My ranch hand has run away, I'm legal guardian." The sheriff went and picked up the boy and brought him back. And then the boy ran away again. And as close as the FBI was able to distinguish, the boy was then resold, down-marketed, from this ranch in Denver to Los Angeles, where he did pornography and prostitution before being sold overseas. They believe Mexico. Now you have this white kid, bruised, probably drug addicted by then, kind of diseased, but starts in Michigan. And that's his route. Lawnmower, used, dents, dings, engine wears out, and you down market him. Same thing with this boy.
I understand.
The mindset behind that is somebody who does not, in my opinion, is so cold inside. And that's why we did the historical point on the sheep and the signing and the George Washington. The mentality is so focused on making the money, and it's so much easier to bring in and hustle a woman and sell her again and again and again, sometimes 20, 30, 40 times a day. And the profit markup on that product, on that investment, is immeasurable. An ounce of cocaine or a lawnmower, you'd sell once and then have to start over.
No, I understand that, but I guess this is where I'm puzzled. If I went to the audience now and said, I have a lawnmower, I give you $25 if you will take it to Fargo and sell it for me, most people who had the time would do that. But if I said, I'd like you to take this young man, and there's a guy in Minneapolis who's going to put him to work on his farm, most people would reject that and would want some reason to believe that this was authentic. They would want paperwork. They'd automatically think, I'm not so certain I like this idea. So almost all human beings are going to reject this. There must be a tiny minority who are willing to do this.
Remember the story of the officer, who the prostitute, Amy Bradley, came in and leaned in and said, I've been kidnapped, help me escape. He put the $20 under the drink and walked out. This case very recently made all the headlines out in western North Dakota. 12, 16-year-old children who are being raped and sold. And it took quite a while for them to get caught. Okay, the man was bringing in, did any one of those children complain when the investigation was, when it was just getting started? The number of victims that he had were countless. Not countless, but it was very high. The number of victims that he had were very high. If I remember right from the indictment, there were 22 different counts in the indictment. 12, 16-year-old children here in North Dakota. Okay? How many of us, and this is just a broad, very rhetorical question, how many of us have sat next to a house, either in college or as we're growing up, or our apartment buildings where we live right now, and we hear a man wailing away on his wife? And we don't say anything. And I'm guessing there's a little bit of squirming right now when we think, because I know of situations like that, even in my own life, where I'm thinking, yes, this woman's in a very unfortunate situation. She's being beaten by her husband or her boyfriend. Or how many of us have friends that now we talk about and we say, yes, their father was not good to them. This community worker was not good to them. They hurt them, they embarrassed them, but we didn't say anything. What happens is we get caught into it. How many people right here, right now, or have listened to this, have been victims of domestic violence themselves and don't pick up the phone? Medical workers, law enforcement workers, attorneys who are victims of domestic violence themselves, yet don't break out of that. The dynamics that lock them in, just like the film clip where the man said, I know all of your facts. I can spill all of your secrets. I own you. I own you. It's like, yes, you do.
But if I can, and to Clay's point, I guess, Patrick, and we're certainly not being argumentative about this, it seems to me that it's quite a leap from domestic violence, and we know domestic violence occurs, and quite a leap from domestic violence to human trafficking. And so I go back to, I guess, my original question, and I think that to Clay's point here is, how many teenagers, maybe I'd be shocked with this answer. How many teenagers are missing in North Dakota? I don't know of any. Maybe some folks here do, but it seems to me when you hear that a teenager has run away, from Mandan or Bismarck, and they ran away, and it's in the paper that they're looking for the 16-year-old or something like that, it pops up on the radar. But it doesn't seem to be that there's a slave ship of cars traveling to Nevada or Los Angeles with North Dakota boys and girls, So I guess that goes back to my first question about going beneath the radar. How big is that number that these are very disturbing stories? Is that number in the state of North Dakota, is it a dozen? Is it hundreds? Is it thousands?
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
I don't know the right number, but by percentage, it's enough for the FBI to put us as a blue state, as a destination state, which has nothing to do with politics, but it's a source state for the runaways that get fed into the child prostitution circle. It wasn't Iowa. You have North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, 3 of the 5 largest states by percentage. And what would be, as the North Dakota Attorney General's office is dealing with, and the law enforcement personnel are working with these large numbers of crimes that are coming up, especially in the western part of the state, with all the new people coming into the state. They're dealing with situations with murders, with rapes, with robberies. I was talking to a girl up in Minot who was coming back from volunteering in Guatemala, and she's a high school girl. And she was telling me about the friends that she had. Now, I didn't ask her how many, but she was telling me about friends that she's had that have been raped or been tried to get picked up on up in Minot. And this conversation happened Thursday. Are the resources there right now? Are the stats there? Are the studies there? I don't believe they are, but I think they have to be. Because one of the biggest things that we're doing right now is we are doing this cry to wake up that this is coming at us fast and furious. So we need to know those numbers. Can we ask it of the Attorney General's office? Can we ask it of the Attorney General's office to do this? No, because they are drowning in the cases that are coming at them fast and furious. We can't ask them to do it on top. But I think we as a government, we as a nation, we as a state have to focus on this. We as a people in North Dakota have to ask it of our legislatures, what is happening? Let's get the hard numbers and develop the hard facts on what we can do to face this problem down.
And to completely agree with you to defend myself from my question I just asked you, is that if the number's 2, that's too many. If the number's 200, that's too many. So, so the point is not that whether or not we should be concerned about it. I agree with you completely. We need to be concerned about it. I've got a personal question for you. We've known each other for, I guess, 4 or 5 years, and I've read the biography on you, and I know that you've done this, or you've been involved in this topic from Hell's Kitchen to Latin America to Southeast Asia to Africa. How much do you think that your immersion into this world affects your personal lens of your world view?
I think yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because my kids, as I've raised them over the years, always say, like, what do you mean we can't go down and hang at the shopping mall? Everybody does. And I say, yes, but do you know what happens there? And it's true. So I get in conversations, like, for example, Mall of the Americas with the security people there. And the things that happen there are horrifying. Does it happen to everybody? No. Does it happen to a large percentage? No. Does it happen to enough that it should terrify the parents to go in, give their kids money and say, hang out in the mall and we'll pick you up in 5 hours? Yes, it should. Do I look at every child who's riding a bicycle down the street and think something's going to happen? No. But do I look at kids walking down the street at 10 o'clock at night by themselves by the river on the footpath and think, oh, please, be safe? Yes. One of the ways I've been able to do this work after 31 years in this profession is by staying focused. As you saw in that one clip, you know, the vast majority of the people are good and positive and happy. But that's not the part that I'm working with. Those are the people that I'm working, those are the people that are joining me in this battle. The people I'm working against are the ones that do hurt the boys and the girls and the women who are taking them, who are sexually abusing them, who are taking them and selling them into these first and secondary and tertiary markets in this field. It's the ones that are making the human trafficking network the second most lucrative illegal industry in the world. Drugs being number one, flesh being number two, and illegal arms being number three. It's a vast market with billions of dollars. I often consider ourselves in the God's Child Project and the Institute for Trafficked, Exploited, Missing Persons as like the emergency room workers. You know, when something bad happens, they bring us the victims. Is everybody who riding a bike in a car going to get in a car accident? No. But we want to be there to make sure that they're putting on their seatbelts, and when there is an accident, the ambulance arrives.
I want to ask a follow-up to that, and I apologize. You know, the personal questions are really interesting, and we're fascinated, of course, because you're one of us. You're from here. You've gone on to do those things, but we have to keep in mind the message is more important than the messenger. Yeah. But, you know, a lot of us can barely sit in our chairs right now in this conversation. We're so upset and disturbed and off our center of gravity. How do you maintain your capacity to be completely open to the world when you have to live with this sort of disturbing information on so continual a basis?
I have a fast memory, and I have a fast forgetfulness. I do. I literally, and this is my secret of success, is I count my victories one by one by one. Okay, today I'm talking to, how many people are here?
120.
125 people today who are going back, who will remember this, who will look at their children differently and not look at them in a paranoid sense, but look at them in a be careful, be aware sense. That's 125 victories today. The God's Child Project today has 13,700 boys, girls, and women in our programs. That's 13,700 victories. Now, how many of the 100,000 child prostitutes in the United States were we able to personally help today? Probably none. Now someone would say that's a horrible crisis. No, it's not. Because we had 125 messengers now going out the door, and we had 13,700 people in our programs. Those are the successes. Tomorrow, we'll give it another shot. Tomorrow, we'll give it another shot. If I ever lost focus and you start you see you're surrounded by the trees and you can no longer, you know, you're lost in the middle of the woods, at that point I'd have to turn and just say, I'm done. We have a lot of people who come up who want to get involved, can afford to get involved in one way or another, and they don't know how. And we need a lot of people to go out and talk to schools and churches and give awareness talks on abuse, on date rape, drugs. Is it going to happen to every kid? No. Has it happened to kids in every grade school level, junior high school level, and college here in Bismarck, North Dakota? I would safely say yes. Has it happened to them all? No. That's the ones, so we're targeting who we're going after, and it's a broad response to reach the individual victims.
I want to ask you a question about what I consider one of the most dangerous phenomena of our times, which is the normalization of pornography. You know, when we were children, pornography was something that was only available behind the counters and very furtively, and it was very heavily restrained. But there has been an almost unbelievable explosion of access And on top of that, a normalization. You have people like Jenna Jameson being sort of culture heroes in a certain way, and you have programs on basic cable like the Kardashians or Girlfriends, which play with the gray area between the commodification of sex and some more traditional model. So how has this deepened the problem?
It's deepened the problem simply. It's hitting our children. Google studies, research done by Google Incorporated. Children 7 years old who do search terms, the number 4 search term for children 7 years old in the United States is the word porn.
Number 4.
The number 4 search term of children 7 years old in the United States, according to Google, is the word porn. Parents, grandparents, gifters, take the computer out of the child's bedroom. Please. They're not, the idea, the fantasy, and this is what I'm doing. I mean, Monica Hannon's book, The Dream Maker, it has sold about 175,000 copies. Monica, thank you. Yes, it is right there. The online porn, it's right there. The computers, they're buying the computers. The fantasy is that they're going to be putting the computers in the bedroom. They're going to be Googling medieval castles and Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, and they are. But they're also Googling, according to Google, the number 4 search term, porn. If you would not let your child go out to a mall, go into Minneapolis, go into New York City, go into Los Angeles, and bring home any strange man or woman and take them in your bedroom alone, take them into the child's bedroom, why would you do it digitally? Don't. Take the computers out of the bedroom. That's where we start. It's us. It's our friends and family, and it's the community. Put the computers, buy them computers. They need access. They need to be very smart. Put the computers in the rec room, in the dining room, in a place where the child can sit and do homework and do the research while we're in the kitchen, while we're in the living room, while we're in the study. Make them part of the family because they can't be babysat by a stranger when that number 4 search term is porn. Okay? It lowers the bar because things that I didn't even know existed until I was 35, 40 years old. They're getting now at 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's lowering the bar of normalization. It's lowering the bar of what is standard, of what is normal. And in the course of my work, I've had to deal with and prepare and view horrendously perverse pornography. And we're not talking just porn. We're talking horrendously perverse porn. Remember the FBI statistic that 90 to 95% of the women and the girls and the children on porn sites do not want to be there. And they've done studies where they look at the eyes of the women and the children who are on the porn, and a lot of times they're drugged out. Okay, they've been roofied, they've been mickeyed. They're not there, their bodies are there, and they wake up the next day and they're very sore and painful and dirty, and or they're there because they're a forced prostitute against their will. And when I tell that story to students on college campuses, it de-romanticizes, it de-sexualizes the pornography they're looking at. They're not looking at porn, they're looking at rape in action of innocent victims. I get very passionate about this because having raised boys, having raised girls in my own family, and then all of the God's Child Project's children, and I see the number that get victimized, I see the number that get hurt. We see them again and again and again, and you just go, oh, please. Someday I will drop dead. And I joke about this with my staff. I will drop dead in a shower stall in North Carolina doing one more presentation. Because if a presentation will stop just 1 or 5 or 50 children from being victimized of disappearing, it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it.
I want to ask a question, Patrick, on, let's back off of the
porn.
Specific topic. Yeah, let's back off and let's get like a 50,000 foot here on human trafficking writ large, slavery. It could be lost boys in Africa. It could be the forced laborers you were talking about, or I think you had 3 categories up there: the sex trade, labor,
and selling the body,
and the body. And I'm going to go to this book because I want you to react to these, if you would. because I'm curious. This is a very good study on slavery, and in your personal experience in dealing with it across the board, across the whole way, what Patterson is saying is that there's basically 3 attributes to slavery that create slavery, and I'll give you each one of these, and then if you can respond to it relative to, and my guess is it's going to be fairly easy here because everything that you've said, but if you respond to it relative to the topic of slavery that you now see in the 21st century, globally or wherever we're at. So the first one he talks about is violence, that there's always violence with that.
There's violence because you have to break down the core of who somebody is. You have to shatter through their sense that they have dominion over their own body, that they are in control of their body and their soul and themselves. It's when you snap that, like the girls standing in the video clip at the bottom, and they're standing in perfect order, and one's already been housebroken. When you snap the body, when you sear the soul, then they become malleable. Okay. They're not going to run.
So one doesn't get invited into slavery.
No.
This is a very violent act. So if we've got human trafficking, there's going to be violence with that.
Force or fraud. They can be tricked into it. They can be brought over thinking they're going to be a magazine cover model, and that's not the case. But there's force or fraud.
Okay. The second one he talks about is natal alienation, where you have to be alienated from your birthright. Does that?
I would not agree, because even this case that we had right now in western North Dakota, the children that were forced into sexual slavery were going home at the end of the day. So unless there's a different interpretation for that.
Okay, that's fair. And the third element is that, and I'll just quote it here, the fact that slaves were always persons who have been dishonored in a generalized way.
Again, breaking through the idea of I'm in control of myself, that this is my body, this is my time, this is my space, this is my life, my space. I am in control of this. You have to shatter that so that you own it. You can rebuild it as you want. This one's been housebroken. Okay. Right. If somebody has this sense of who they are, if they're rebellious, they're a risk. And a product that's a risk is either downsold, down-marketed, or if it's a risk to the operation, if you have 100 horses and one of them's just an ornery old thing, if you can't sell it, you might just shoot it. Mm-hmm. Again, we're talking the profitability, the marketability of a commodity. Okay. You got to snap the sense of self so that you own the body, because they don't care who you are. Human traffickers have no intention, no idea, not the slightest interest in who you are. They don't care that you're somebody's son, daughter, brother, sister, mother. They want your body for labor, for sex, for pornography, for body organs, if you're small enough, for adoption.
Let's talk about North Dakota. I think a lot of people were shocked, I know I am, that North Dakota is one of the principal sources, one of the blue state sources of trafficking of young people. Also that Hope, North Dakota, had the worst situation of trafficking that you cited. The thing in western North Dakota, you mentioned Indian reservations. For us, we North Dakotans have a kind of a comfortable sense of ourselves, that this is a peaceful backwater and families are intact, we're church-going people, God-fearing. You're suggesting a picture that challenges that mythology?
In the video clip, the Homeland Security officer came to the second floor, and he was talking to the family whose daughter had just been abducted, and he said, most people over here are honorable, positive, happy, good. Okay. Most. Here in our Bismarck-Mandan community, the reason we have murders, the reason we have Police Youth Bureau, the reason we have a police force is not to deal with the most, it's to deal with the others. The reason we're having this talk right now is not to raise awareness of the good people, and the vast majority are very good. I mean, I built an international charity on the generosity and support of very, very good people right here in Bismarck-Mandan area. The work that we do is with the others. And if you talk to the police, if you talk to the social services, if you talk to the Attorney General's office, the number of cases that we have. Recent prosecution and conviction up in Grand Forks of an individual who had hundreds of child pornography videos on his computer when he was busted. I believe that made the paper here. I was out of state, but I think that also made the paper here. That happens. The kids here, what we need to do is we as good people need to be aware of this dynamic so we can teach our children to keep them safe. And then also be aware of how it can also affect us as adults, our sisters, our 17-year-old daughters, to keep them safe. Not from the good people, of whom the vast majority are, but from the others.
Say more about Indian reservations.
Indian reservations, just like the rest of the society, there's a map up here that had the flow of human trafficking victims between the areas that are poor to areas that are wealthier. There's a big misconception that on the Indian reservations, everybody's making a lot of money, the casinos are bringing a lot of money, it's being equally distributed. The rates of alcoholism, of drug addiction, of single parenthood, of sexual and physical abuse on the Indian reservations is statistically much higher. There are, right now, as a project with God's Child Project and ITEMP, we're working on an Indian reservation in Minnesota where the children are being sold to people off-res who are coming in and using the boys and the girls. Okay. That dynamic exists here because there's a lack of family tie. The family culture is very good, but the alcoholism, the drug addiction, the poverty make these children very vulnerable. Is it part of the culture? No. Is it part of the current modern day fabric? Yes. It's across the board also here in the state. As we're spending more and more time online with gadgets, with toys, and spending less time with our children as a family, we're leaving our children vulnerable. And the 52, 50, 60-inch TV screen is not going to babysit them while we go out with our friends. They know if we're spending time with them, they're appreciating that, and they're building that sense of security. If somebody does approach them, they can talk to us and say, I've had this problem.
In western North Dakota, we're suddenly having an influx of literally thousands, tens of thousands of young men between the ages of 18 and 40. And most of them are not traveling with their families. Most of them are leaving their restraining mechanisms, their communities, their churches, their neighbors behind somewhere in Arkansas or California or New York. How big is this problem going to be in North Dakota?
Look at the headlines right now as compared to most people here that I see a lot of familiar faces have been around for a number of years. Think of the headlines now versus the headlines 2 or 3 years ago. It's a vast difference. Do you remember if there was a murder in the state, it was major news for not only that year, but for several years? It's not like that anymore. Our state is changing right now, and what we need to do, we as a people, we as a community, we need to be aware of it so we can spread the words, we can keep our children safe, and so we can realize, just like you said, tens of thousands of testosterone-driven single males coming in. They're not from the community. They don't have the ties. They didn't grow up with the Swanson family or the Johnsons, down the street. And they realize very well also that in 3, 5, 10 years from now, they're not going to be here either. They've gone from place to place. There's a lot of people with lower educations. What is their tie? What are their, like you said, restraining orders? Or not restraining orders, they're restraining mechanisms.
They have a lot of money in their pockets.
They have a lot of money in the pockets. They've been working really hard. They have a lot of testosterone pumping through their system. They're very sweaty, and they're ready for some action.
Let me ask a really delicate question.
Yep.
I've heard that, I'm not necessarily saying North Dakota, but I've heard that where there are large corporations, not energy extraction necessarily, but large corporations working in faraway places where there are young men being piped in, that those corporations sometimes have internal institutions of entertainment. What do you know about this?
Wouldn't surprise me. It'd be illegal. It would be a major news story if it was documentable, provable, and put out there. At the same time, the major energy corporations, the U.S. militaries around the world, deal with the dynamics of thousands or tens of thousands of hardworking, testosterone-driven men between the prime hormonal ages. Okay? I would very much be interested in being able to prove and document something like that, because I would run with this like you could not believe. Not because of the effect that it's having on the men. I'm not going to judge morality and ethics and personal behavior, but because what's coming in the pipeline, the prostitutes, the entertainers that are being brought in, given all that we know over the last hour and a half, are not there by choice.
Larry, you were going to say.
Oh, I just want to say that we're not saying that's going on in the state of North Dakota.
I didn't say that.
No, we did not say that.
Just want to make sure we're not accusing anybody of that. You know, it draws close to our quitting time here. Is Robin out here with the, Robin has a microphone. I would ask you please to wait until Robin shows up if you've got a question for Patrick or Clay. And we will, and we have to, because the microphone, in fact, helps. This is streamed live and it's being taped, and so we need to get to a microphone here. So can we turn up the house lights just a little bit, please? And
who has a question?
Any questions? There are some. Monica Hannon has a question right here. Monica, we're delighted you came.
Thank you. Actually, it was just a point of information for you, Dr. Scogan. I think one of the reasons you don't hear a lot about runaways is because we don't publish it unless it's an immediate danger to the child and the police ask us to. But we get many requests from parents asking us to.
Really?
So I just thought I would point that out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Assuming most of them are men, are there women involved in this too that are kidnapping these kids and either turning them into the slave trade or actually being the abusers?
My answer to that question is answering with a rhetorical question. Are there women involved in business? Then the answer is yes. Because somebody who's in that, whether it's a man or a woman, they're not looking this as being a child, and they're not necessarily looking at it as being a sexual partner. It's something they're buying or selling. I gave a presentation several years ago to a retired businessman's group, and I talked about runaways and boys who get involved in prostitution. And somebody raised their hand and said, why would a woman have to hire a boy as a prostitute? And I was thinking that's not who would hire the boy as a prostitute necessarily. But his answer was probably applicable across 90% of the people sitting in the room. So are there women involved in business? Yes. Are there women who move drugs? Yes. Are there women who move guns? Yes. Then by logic and also by case history, there are women involved in the moving of human flesh.
More questions?
Right.
I think there was one right by you, Rob.
I wonder what you would say to young Miss Jenkinson going to New York and to...
She's not. But, go ahead.
And to myself as a caregiver of a 5-year-old who doesn't understand why I won't let him play outside alone. Where's the balance in how to educate these young people and keep them safe without totally confining them?
It's a great question.
It is.
Yeah. The last thing we want to do is become paranoid. And I mean, we as a culture, we as a society, we as individuals. Because is the danger out there? Yes, it is. Is it overwhelmingly unrisky? No. So that's the last thing we want to do. The first thing we want to do is be aware of the dynamic so that we can teach our children, so we can teach young Ms. Jenkinson, so she is aware so that when she goes to a party, and she will go to parties, she realizes that she opens up her own can of diet soda and she drinks it. She doesn't have somebody pour her a drink and bring it over. So that she doesn't come, myself, first time I went to New York City by myself, I was 18, and I was walking down Times Square. I was 2 months out of high school. And somebody comes up to me and says, oh, you're a good-looking boy, you're a good-looking boy, where are you from? And I said, North Dakota. And they said, and this is a very true story, would you like to be a model? We're looking for good-looking young men to be models. But I had enough of a twist in my head, then I said, this isn't right. Now, if I had gone with that person and he gave me a card, which I still have to this day, as a modeling agent, it could have been horrible, it could have been horrendous. Be aware, don't be paranoid. Watch our children, and as they grow, to let them grow. We don't want to be helicopter parents so that they never become independent, so they never become self-aware of the world. They have to. It's a phased transition. At the same time, that phasing of transition into independence, into adulthood, does not start at 7 or 8 or 10. You know, it's a phased transition into independence and into adulthood. And make them very aware, make them very wise, and talk to them in a sense that's not going to create panic, paranoia, fear, but concern and street smarts.
I got a feeling after this presentation, Dad Jenkinson's going to move into the women's dorm.
I think that's illegal, actually. No, I mean, I don't want this to be at all about my child, but if she wanted to go to New York, I would be glad for her to go, but I definitely plan to have a new conversation with her in the face of this. I was just with her and I was saying things like, when you go to your car, have your key between your knuckles in case you need to strike back, and always have your phone poised so you can call 911 or call your mom or whatever. And you know, you can make long lists of these, but in the case of Drew Shadeen, for example, even the best prepared people find themselves suddenly caught off guard, and it happens so suddenly and there's no context for it. Mm-hmm. So you walk to your car in the parking lot. Yeah, there's been a guy who kind of creeped you out a little bit, but that's not the most unusual thing in the world. And then suddenly, wham, before you even can react as a responsible human being, it has occurred.
Parking lot example. Don't walk through parking lots? No, bad decision. We have to walk through parking lots. When you leave the building, stop. Take a scope of the parking lot. Okay, is there anyone there? No. Is your car there? Yes. Go to your car. Stop. Take a scope of the parking lot. Is there somebody there? Yeah. What are they doing there? I don't know. Reevaluate the situation. If it's uncomfortable, call security. If you're at a shopping mall or something. If we get that tingly sense that something's not right, I think that's human nature's way, Mother Nature's way of saying, listen. If we get that tingling sensation that something's not right, it probably is not. Should they travel? Yes, absolutely they should travel. We had a 13-year-old boy recently I met in the streets of Antigua, Guatemala. He was down there on his own from Amsterdam. He was in between school break, and his mother said, go down to Antigua, learn Spanish. I said, who are you with? He said, nobody. And I'm like, Mother, where are you? You know, don't do that to your 13-year-old. 17, 18, 20, 25, yes. But that phase transition has to occur as a phase and as a transition. Step by step by step. We go to kindergarten, to grade school, to junior high. After junior high, we go to high school, and then all the really smart ones come to Bismarck State College.
When is someone essentially outside the profile? When you're 30, when you're 40, I mean, how far up does this go in age?
Outside the danger zone.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm in Arizona, my mom's 85, I still walk her to her car.
But that's another question.
The role has shifted. Are we ever alone? Are we ever rocks in the middle of the ocean? No. We're always family. I mean, we as a family and we as a community, we're always family.
But typically, trafficking is young people, often girls, not always, between the ages of what and what?
Could be boys, could be girls, could be women, could be young men for labor. I'm 53, no, they probably wouldn't want me. But they could. Okay, why? Because I have heart, liver, lungs, skin, cornea. They could. Statistically, just looking at the body, the higher the commodity is going to be your 10 to 25-year-old girl, principally, also boy, slender over heavyweight, blonde hair, much more marketable on both national and international markets than brunettes, blue-eyed, more marketable than brown eyes. Again, but there's a niche for everything. The higher the risk, the higher the awareness. But we all have to be aware. Our children, our grandchildren. Yes?
Another question here?
So we have an area with a concentrated demand with some folks that have the means to purchase what's being in demand. It almost makes me think that legalizing prostitution, if it protects our children, is worth it. Are there any studies or statistics on areas or countries that have legalized prostitution and how this impacts?
Prostitution is legal in parts of every country in the Western Hemisphere, including the United States. So every country in the Western Hemisphere has legalized prostitution. I don't think prostitution is the answer, because prostitution, what it does is it legalizes, it recognizes, gives legitimacy to the demand for the product, which is a human being, a sexual outlet, right? So someone's going to step up and produce the product to meet that demand, and they're going to make money on it as a mid-person. And as we've been listening to, the prostitutes, the boys, the girls, the women who are involved in it, are primarily there through force, through fraud, sometimes by mental illness. The Pretty Woman that we saw, Julia Roberts' role in the movie Pretty Woman, that's fiction. That's Hollywood fiction. Much more likely is the movie that won the Oscar award in the movie Monster. You know, I forgot who that actress was. Cheryl Therese. Yeah. So legitimizing the demand does not have anything to do with the source of the product.
It also legitimizes the damage that's been done to the people who wind up in those places of prostitution. So it's like giving a pass.
It's giving a pass, and then we also have to stop back and say, who are we as a people? Who are we as a family? Who are we as a society? Are we saying it's okay to, like this film, you're talking about the films that are out right now, MTV film, Friends with Benefits. Is it okay for me to have my girlfriend and then have a friend with benefit with whom I can have sexual relationships on a no hassle basis, but I still have my girlfriend? And if that's the case, are we saying it's okay for me to be married in a relationship, committed, devoted relationship, but have a friends with benefit? You know, it's like in the course of all of this, which is why the conversation process is so brilliant, we are defining who we are as a people, who we are as a community, and what's acceptable. Sir, you had a question?
Francis has a question here, Robin.
What percentage of the traffickers are ever apprehended and prosecuted?
I don't know. I don't know, and it's a good question. I can tell you, though, it would be very low. And the reason it would be very low is because how do you prove involvement in the profit motive between one person and the other? You can prove this sexual interaction between two people, especially if one is a minor. You can prove the kidnapping of a child from a household. You can prove the transportation of a child across state lines, which makes it a federal crime for sexual purposes. You can prove rape. But can you prove the person, the businessman or woman, like you asked earlier, who is sitting back, who is setting up, who is running the network, who is running the system, who it's nothing more than pieces of paper who they'll probably have never in contact with? This very last video clip that we have where the actor comes downstairs and is talking to the women who are lined up in the bar basement. What did he do wrong? I mean, objectively looking at it, what did he do wrong? He didn't touch them. He didn't hit them. But he said, we have all your information. Don't do anything to threaten our relationship. Now, good, an attorney can break that out and find things he did wrong criminally, but prove it. So human trafficking as a system, as a network, is difficult to prove. So the short answer is, I'll bet the statistic is very low. Yes, ma'am.
Well, it's kind of more of a comment than a question, but I think it's pretty clear that both cultural and legal changes are needed to deal with this problem more at a wholesale than a retail method, even though I think it is extremely important what you've been talking about, better and more pervasive education for young people. But what I wanted to say is about North Dakota. There was an article in the paper maybe within the last 2-3 weeks about the probation and parole office talking about how their caseloads have gone up so dramatically because of the people coming into the state with criminal records looking for work here. and they can't get more money out of the state to put on more probation and parole officers, even though North Dakota is supposedly rolling in money right now. But I do think one thing for North Dakota, with regard to the increase in this problem in our local communities here, is that we do need to have a better pacing about having the local resources of law enforcement, in addition to all the other kinds of resources that are needed to be able to deal with the oil boom, because I think that's the area where people are seeing that maybe this is most threatening, even though obviously issues occur in the other cities also. But to have our government provide people with resources for both being able to apprehend perpetrators of these activities, as well as to provide in the local communities for those men who would like to be upstanding citizens the kind of environment that could make them feel like they are part of a community instead of living in man camps. I do know that historically one of the big reasons for the widespread persistence of AIDS in South Africa was because of the way the men were separated from the women with the apartheid system, the men working in the mines, and the women were not allowed to accompany their men to come with them. And we haven't passed any laws like that, but by not providing opportunities for people to live in houses with their families, you know, I think we're, in a sense, helping to perpetrate the kinds of conditions that lead the men who then get involved in the trade in the terms of demanding the services. So I think there is some obligation on us as citizens of North Dakota to speak up for a better legal and political response to this problem in our communities here too. So that's just a little sermon rather than a question.
You know, but absolutely, and it starts with awareness of the problem. And it starts with awareness, and it becomes being aware and being educated of what's happening. The problem, I don't think, is that we have we all know, of course, we don't have the houses that are available to make available for the people who are coming into work. They would love to live in apartments and houses rather than in tents or trailers or the back seat of their car. The rush, the boom has moved so far, so fast. The tsunami of activity has so far outranked the available resources in the hotel rooms and the infrastructure and the sewage lines. It's not fair at all to ask our Attorney General, you know, do something about this right now, because trust me, they're all working very, very hard and having one heck of a time hanging on to their deputy sheriffs and police forces who are being offered 2, 3, 4 times the amount of money to lay down the uniform and join the crew right then. But that's where we have to be aware of the problem. We have to ask the legislature to be aware of this and deal with this professionally. You know, as founder and executive director of the God's Child Project and Institute for Trafficked, Exploited, and Missing Persons, and Murray Sagsbeen here, you know, who's with us today as Chief Operating Officer, who's going to run the machine of the project, let us help you. As Bismarck State College, you've raised a fascinating question about the statistics, about the numbers, not the by percentage as the FBI puts it, but the actual numbers. Brilliant coursework for any of your classes, for any of the departments to take on. In other words, knowing the problems that we do and having our eyes open. I don't mean to shock people. What I mean to do is wake us up and say, look, this is our world here in North Dakota as of 2 years ago, in a greatly exaggerated state compared to what it was 20 years ago. This is our new reality. Let's deal with it. Let's identify these problems while they're getting the houses, while they're dealing with the man camps, while they're dealing with the people who are immobile and living in the back seats of their cars. At the same time, we can't just allow a certain generation of our children to be victimized on the streets, or the buses going between bar and bar and bar with the dance poles, you know, as they're picking up the guys and moving them around. That's where we need to raise our voice in an outcry with our legislatures and with our community groups and say, you know what, this is who we are going to be. Now let's make it law, let's make it practice, let's make it part of the fabric of who we have as a North Dakotan society.
Patrick, we're roughly out of time, but first of all, you have woken us up, and we all thank you for that. It's been an unbelievable afternoon, a very disturbing one, but a very important one. So I'm guessing I'm wanting to know a little bit about what we should do, so we can, of course, make donations to the organizations that you have created and ones like it. We can talk to our neighbors about this and be more aware when we see an article in the Bismarck Tribune or the Minot Daily News. We can talk to our legislators and ask for reasonable infrastructural improvements, particularly in questions of law enforcement and so on. But going back to something you said about people noticing each other, maybe someone's hitting his wife in the house next door. If we see in our community young people that look like they might be damaged by their parents, beaten or sexually abused, or by uncles or whatever, what's the right thing for a citizen to do? We live in a society where there's a whole range of back off on questions of this sort. What should we do?
One of the brochures you're getting is the iTemp brochure. Drop us an email. Give us a call. If there's something happening right then, right there, someone's getting beaten, call 911. Last night I was coming home from a function down at Peacock Alley, and as we were walking out to our car, the person I was with, we heard a girl that was having a beg fight with her boyfriend. I called 911. Okay, the police have to be aware of it so they can deal with it. If you're in doubt, if you're not sure, drop us an email, give us a call. Murray Sagston, do you guys know Murray? Here, Murray, stand up. I'm going to embarrass you. This is Murray Sagston. Murray is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
That's not what he told me.
Have people come out and speak to the community groups, because by raising awareness, by raising public education, by raising the standard of what we know about our new reality, we can deal with it. If we live in oblivion, if we live in nostalgic memories of who we were, people are going to get hurt. And we will fight to the end to stop that last person from getting hurt. Thank you, guys.
Patrick, I guess two things to say.
Yeah.
One is I want to thank you very much for spending your afternoon with us. I've been looking forward to having this conversation since we put it on the schedule last year, and I appreciate it very much. I know that you certainly elevated the awareness of everybody that's here, everybody that's watching it on streaming, and this will be on TV channels in Dickinson and Bismarck and Fargo here in the next month or so. So we're certainly getting the message out. So I thank you for doing that with us here at Bismarck State. And then secondly, I just want to thank you and compliment you. You make us very proud as North Dakotans that it's a North Dakotan that's leading this fight, not only within our state, nation, but globally. And we're just proud to say that you're one of us, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.